You're listening to 204 Hoops Talk. I'm your host, Blaine Stenson.
And I'm your host, Arjun Narula.
Welcome to episode 3. We are going to get into the All-Star game and all of the festivities from San Francisco this weekend. I guess just to start off, do you have anything you liked particularly about this weekend?
I'll say it was more competitive. I mean, aside from the last game, the scores were closer. I saw more defense. I didn't see as many just run and dunks or like that track meet of just back and forth. Probably more threes than I would have liked to see, but definitely was a more competitive format overall.
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly agree with that sentiment. Outside of the last game between Team Shaq and Team Chuck. I mean, I thought that game was a little bit. It certainly lacked some excitement. The first game, like I remember, I texted you during the first game, and I said, I actually don't mind this format as much as I'm, a traditionalist, and um, I've been quite critical of the change and stuff. I'd like to see it as just a regular, a regular 48-minute game, but apparently that hasn't been working, so they had to try something. But you know, the one thing that I didn't really like though was the rookies, and the
Yeah.
rookie being in the game. I don't really know what your thoughts are on that, but I just didn't think they belong, and I don't like the idea of seeing guys like Keontae George and Dalton Connect and Stephon Castle on an all-star floor. They haven't earned it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like, I know, we'll probably get into it later on, but there was a lot of snubs and people that we thought should have been on it, right? Like, probably a lot more this year than other years. I know some people made it due to, like injuries for like AD and stuff, but I agree. I think it's kind of got to be earned. And I know like they have their rookie sophomore game and all that where they kind of get to have their limelight. But when you're talking about like sharing the floor with, yeah, I agree that you got to earn your stripes there. I don't think they're quite there yet. I would agree with that.
So yeah, and I agree with everything you're saying. So I have a list here that I kind of put together, and I would just kind of like your thoughts. And I'm going to go by conference first, and I just kind of I'm going to read you the list, and you kind of let me know who you think on this list was maybe the biggest snubs, and who should have gotten in and stuff. So for the Eastern Conference, we have LaMelo Ball,
Yeah.
Tyrese Maxey,
Hmm.
Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah.
Zach Levine, even though he did get traded near the end, so I think that he probably, if he had gotten in, I assume I don't actually know how that works, to be honest, if he would have gone in with the East because he played most of his games in the East, or if it would have been to the West. Um,
I'm not sure. I would say it makes sense that he goes in on the East, but I don't know what the official rule is.
yeah, just given that he's on Sacramento, Derek White, Jared Allen, and Jalen Johnson. Oh,
Yeah.
and Franz Wagner. So I just kind of want your thoughts
Yeah.
on that
I
list.
would say
Probably the biggest, two or three snubs from that list.
I would say on that, LaMelo and Tyrese Maxey are definitely up there. For in my opinion, for the two. I know people talk about record and this and that, but like LaMelo's been having a good year. Tyrese Maxey, I think he might have missed a couple games, but it's been pretty solid. Um, and then that third one is tough. Like Halliburton could be there. I'm trying to remember who else was there that you had named. But I think if I had to go two or three, top two in my mind on that list would be Maxi and Ball for sure. What are your thoughts?
Well, certainly statistically, Lamelo Ball, should be in the conversation. I mean, I believe he's definitely got the numbers. Like I want to say he's averaging close to 30, I would probably say, and his assist numbers are always very good. So talent wise, and in terms of his style of play, I think he definitely warrants all-star consideration. It's just them only winning, what are they at, 13 wins
They
or
don't
something.
have a lot of wins, but that's
Yeah,
part of it. Like his
13 and 30.
style.
Yeah, they're 13 and 39, right? So
Yeah.
I
his
think that
style really fits an all-star game too. But you got to have more than just the flair, I guess.
yeah, I would say out of the out of those two that you mentioned though, I think Tyrese Maxey for sure. Because Philly hasn't had a great year. They're 20 and 34, but I mean we've seen guys in the past, not play on good teams. I'll use my guy D Wade as an example. In 2008, when the Heat were 15 and 67, he still started for the East before he was ultimately shut down for the remainder of the season because it was a pointless season and stuff. And obviously back then it was, starters were solely based on fan voting, and then the
Yeah.
reserves were off of um,
Coaches, GMs, and all that. Yeah.
coaches, GMs, and now it's a little bit of a combination of both. So the starters aren't quite so, set in stone based on what the fans want to see. But, I think
Mhm.
like, Tyrese Maxey, he's averaging 27 a game. And look at all the games that, Embiid has missed, Paul George
George.
missed. And just outside of that, Paul George has been terrible this year. He's,
Yeah.
I saw one thing on well, I not one thing and not just on Twitter. I've seen it on social media. People clowning him that he's got more podcast clip uploads than he's got points or something along
Yeah.
those lines this season, right? So, where
They
where are his
they're chirping
priorities?
him.
Yeah,
There's one that I saw where it's like, yeah, you know what? He scored like 2 points, got all this money, and then just took a trip to Mexico and just kind of like hoodwinked the Sixers, and like I'm like, yeah, well, like it's not wrong. And I mean, I think the Clippers were smart to get rid of him. Norman Powell's doing what he should be doing for Philadelphia for the Clippers. So definitely interesting. What are your thoughts on, you know, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like. What would we maybe want to see change in the All-Star game? And like, would you want to have like an all snub team instead of the rookie team, like we were talking about?
well, that's what I was like. We didn't even get to the West. Like, I still have a list of the Western Conference.
Yeah,
I'll answer that question as I'm kind of going through this list and stuff.
yeah,
I mean, certainly, I think what would have been better and what they could do is, okay. So they selected the all-star teams basically how they always have,
yeah.
East and West, and then it got broken up, so it was whatever 12 players on each side, or whatever the exact number is. um what I think they could have done is, yeah, I like the idea of an all snub team instead of the rookies, because they're at least more deserving, right?
Yep.
um but as far as, when it comes to resume and on your playing record and stuff, what you could do, because if I'm correct, which and it better be like this, the rookies that played in the All-Star game, they don't get a tick on their record that they are a one-time All-Star,
Yeah.
right? So I think you could do the same thing
The
uh,
snubs.
with the snubs, right? They weren't selected to the All-Star team, but they're the next best, and because I believe it was 8 people, or eight or nine players per team. uh,
Yeah.
yeah, 8 or 9 players per team. So you take the next best eight, or the or the nine best, next best nine.
Hmm.
Yes, and I think that would be, I think that would be a much better way. And that those guys, well, I shouldn't even say, because we've said in the past, oh, they're going to change the All-Star game up this way, and this is going to make it more competitive. They said it again this year, and sure, it did at times, but like the last game, that wasn't competitive, and it looked very much you know like a first quarter of a typical All-Star game. Guys were kind of standing around. There was no urgency and stuff. But I would like to see the snubs and stuff. Like, so, I mean, if you had a team of, like the biggest snubs, right? Like you take LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Maxey. I think Tyrese Halliburton, that's one that we didn't really touch on before and stuff. But I mean, the guy's averaging 19.8 and 8.7 assists on
Yeah. Those are
50
numbers.
on 50%, basically 50% from the field and 40% from three, and they've got the fourth best record in the East. So for teams that had, two all-stars, like there was a lot of talk about Devin Booker, who's another snub from the,
The West.
from the Western Conference. Um, he's averaging 25, 26 a game. I think a lot of people were questioning that, but I think probably the thought process with that is the Suns are 24 and 22. right? They haven't
Yeah.
had a very good year, so I think that that's kind of one of those things where it's like they got one All-Star in Kevin Durant. Do they really deserve two? Right?
Yeah.
A team like um,
Indiana.
Indiana being 30 and 23. I think Tyrese Halliburton absolutely should have been on there, kind of thing, but just very very quickly because we didn't quite get to it. Just the list of guys from the West, right? You had
Yep.
Domantas Sabonis, Norman Powell, who you did mention,
Mm.
um, uh, Zubac, which I don't I personally wouldn't consider him a snub. I don't really think he's deserving of that. De'Aaron Fox, who was, he's been, from what if I'm correct, like I'm pretty sure he's been, you know, pretty damn healthy all year. Like, yeah,
And
he's played 50 games. He's played 50 games this year, right? So he's
yeah,
pretty played in, in every game. He's been a decent defender all year. Um, John Morant was snubbed.
yeah,
Uh, Devin Booker, who we were just talking about. Luka is probably the one that's, I think is probably maybe the most surprising despite all the injuries he's had because he's one of the three or four best players in the league. And, in my opinion, I think he's probably number two, maybe
yeah,
number three at worst kind of thing. So even though he's missed some time, playing in, I believe it's 24 games or something like that this year,
yeah.
I don't know how you really leave him off. Like he certainly would have been on the all snub team, but I guess maybe with they probably would have thought maybe the coaches didn't select him because even if he had played enough games, would he have been healthy enough to even play anyway? So what's the point of you know
Giving that spot to him versus someone else, and then who's going to replace him? Yeah, I mean, off that list, I would say Luca's definitely up there. I feel like somebody on the Kings should have been. Now, like you know, I
yeah so
think De'Aaron Fox has a better year this year than Sabonis, in my opinion. I know they've both been All Stars in the past, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah
I would say off that list, Fox, Luca one, Fox two, and maybe trying to think like Devin Booker at three. But like your argument or case for like, do they really need two off the Suns? Yeah, it's a hard one to sell.
and I mean I guess you could make a and because he played most of the season with the Kings, I mean you could probably make that distinction. Like they're 28 and 27, right? So they're
Yeah,
they're not much better than um they're not much better than the Phoenix Suns. And I apologize, before I said the Suns were 24 and 22. They're actually 26 and 28. So I actually had their record wrong. So I correct me on that one. But I mean, like, look at Sabonis. Like, I'm just looking at his numbers here right now, and he's averaging a career high 20.9 points a game. He leads the league in rebounding at 14 and a half, and
yeah.
he's getting 6.5 assists a game. Like, and he's hitting 48% from three.
Yeah.
Like that's
Those are
I
all-star numbers.
yeah, I think that would be the one. And I mean, you could make the, well, going back to, do they deserve two? I was just about to say, well, De'Aaron Fox is on the Spurs now, so maybe as of that, the Kings don't have a representation, but
Yeah.
they already have Wemby, and the Spurs are 23 and 29, right? So, do they
Make a
really
case for
deserve
both.
anybody beyond Wemby? So I think it could have been a toss up with, with Fox and Sabonis kind of thing. But I think next year, I think that's what they need to do is go to an all snub team, because there's no benefit of having the rookies there. Like I said, they just don't. And sophomores. It's not just rookies and stuff, but they don't deserve to be there. It's not
No.
fair to, like, look at a guy like Mike Conley. And
Yep.
I don't believe Mike Conley has ever made an all-star game. If he has, it's maybe one
Maybe
time,
one. Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure it's none. But this is a guy who, was one of the best point guards in the league at one point, and at one point when NBA contracts really exploded. At one point, he signed what was then the biggest contract in NBA history for a guy that's never never been an all-star, quote unquote, right? So, if he doesn't ever get to touch a all-star floor, how is it fair that these guys do?
I think he's been to one all-star game in 2021, but
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. At
it's
least
I
he's
think he might have been a backup for someone, but I know what you mean. Like he's a steady guy that could you could make
yeah,
the case for.
yeah, he's perennial all-star talent.
Yeah.
The one thing, and I think the biggest criticism, and I think we owe our listeners a little bit of an apology because this is now the third straight episode here where we're, you know, bitching and complaining about things about the NBA, but it's just so hard in today's league not to have stuff to complain about because the product they're putting out is not very good. But
Yeah.
and I think you had listed off the numbers. We were talking about it before, but it was something like only 42 minutes of basketball for the
For the
three the
three
three
games, yeah.
hours, and it was something like 80 minutes of ads and transitions, and there was all these different presentations and stuff. And in the last in the championship game,
Mm.
for the All-Star game, they stopped for whatever it was, 20 minutes to honor the TNT guys, and they absolutely deserve to be honored. They've won how many Emmys? It's the best sports show on television by far.
Oh yeah, no,
But
for sure.
but but do you do that in the middle of a game? Why not?
I would
Why
do
not?
it before, after.
Yeah, and probably before, like in between, like right before that last championship game, or in between the first and second game, you do it right in there because at the end of the game, that's when people are like, it's over. We're gonna start tuning out, and you want people to be tuned in for that, right? So, but at the time that they did that, the score, so the fans would have been looking up at the scoreboard in the arena, and the score was 11-1. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like
11-1.
what's the point of that? I just don't.
It's not like somebody hit their like, like sometimes somebody gets a big milestone in the middle of the game, they'll stop. This is totally different. So
Yeah.
I would agree. I would totally have waited. But they had their agenda. Whoever planned that out didn't really kind of stagger it the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I saw another stat, and now this is credit to, I believe the only league that is still doing it properly, when it comes to their All-Star festivities. The NHL really changed it up this year with their four
Four
nation
nations, yeah,
Four
big
Nation
time.
stuff. And as we saw the Royal Rumble that took place on Saturday, the same night that Wemby and Chris Paul decided that they were going to cheat in the skills challenge, Team USA and Team Canada decided that we're going to have three fights in the first 10 seconds of the game. And
Yeah.
they're actually playing, right? But so the number that I saw, and I might not be exact on these numbers, but if my memory serves me correctly, the NBA All-Star game at any one point had 4.1 million viewers. That's the
Hmm.
same thing that Team USA and Team Canada had. So the NHL, which is not a league that has really ever rivaled the NBA in terms of ratings, for All-Star
Neck and
weekend,
neck.
which historically the All-Star game has been very popular until the last, pretty much since Kobe died is when, or not, sorry, when he played his last All-Star game.
2016, yeah.
It's been on a steady decline, pretty much since then, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
the NHL, I think they hit the nail on the head because everybody's been saying, do this every year. We don't want to see the All-Star game because they were having the same issues with their game where there was
Yep.
no physicality. And I mean, you would get, I think I don't know because I'm not the biggest hockey fan in the world, despite us being, Canadians. Sorry, Canada. um but you would see 9-7, 8-4, these ridiculous numbers for
Numbers.
hockey kind of thing, which is kind of the same thing when we see these 155 to 140 all-star games, which I mean you see that in the regular
Regular
season.
season now, yeah.
you
But
know
they also got rid of all of their stuff, right? They used to have like the fastest skater, the hardest slap shot. The NHL took that out now. It's just this kind of, mini tournament, if you can call it. And they're gonna have a unreal championship game because that Canada USA rivalry is gonna be restored. Getting into we talked about the All-Star game, but a little bit about Saturday night. McClung basically single-handedly saved the dunk contest. He won his third straight, and I don't know if you've seen this figure, Blaine, but he's made more money from winning dunk contests. I believe it's around 190,000, and he made 132K from his NBA contract. So or G League contracts, whatever. Like, what does that tell you? The guy's not even in the league, and they're just using him as kind of like a puppet. Then I saw like John Morant saying, "Oh, I might come out." Zach Levine said on Twitter, like, "I might look at joining it again," but I don't know if that's clickbait or if they're like, we need to like kind of be the saving grace. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that he's a phenomenal dunker, but I mean, really, I don't watch the G League, so I can't speak on what kind of caliber G League player he is or anything like that. But he's not an NBA player. That's the reality. Whether he's played in, I don't even know if he's played in any NBA games, to be totally honest with you. But the fact that this is the guy, like this is the best you can do for the dunk contest. I mean, this is why people complain, right? Like,
Mhm.
yes, it was spectacular to watch, but he's not an NBA player, so I don't really care about the dunk contest
Yeah.
anymore as a result. The one thing I will say is Stephon Castle, you know, he's a legit NBA player, and he's probably going to be the rookie of the year. Probably, I would assume he's definitely in the
He's up
conversation.
there.
I know he's the betting favorite as of right now to be the rookie of the year, him and Kalel Ware for the Heat. But he had some good dunks.
He
It
did,
was
yeah.
definitely better than it had been, but it still wasn't, it wasn't anything, you know, legendary, or it certainly wasn't Vince Carter in 2000, or Jordan versus Dominique, or
Yeah.
Jason Richardson,
Richardson, yeah.
and obviously, Aaron Gordon versus Zach
Zach
Levine, and
Levine,
Aaron Gordon again when him and Derek Jones went at it, and
yeah.
D Wade pulled a pulled a
The
somewhat,
nine.
questionable decision on that one. I mean,
And I was going to ask you about that actually, because I was going to talk about, like fan involvement and all that. There's been some issues, concerns with judging, right? Biases, favorites, whatever you want to call it. But I think to get the fans more engaged, I think they should be involved in the judging. Like I know they do the MVP voting and all that, but if you could get them kind of, to have some say in the dunk judging, I think that would be huge. But I want to know your thoughts on that. If you think
yeah,
it's
I don't.
viable.
Yeah, I don't know how they would go about that. I mean, I think they would probably do it through the NBA app, really, and let the fans, and I mean, even there, right, you're still gonna have bias, right? Because there's guys, if it's for your team and stuff like
Yeah.
that, you're probably gonna, oh no, I thought that one was a 50, right? Instead of, maybe it should have been a 48, or you know,
Yeah.
whatever. But I think it would be cool to at least try. At this point, the NBA, they clearly decided to try something completely new with the All-Star game. They've changed the format of the skills competition, which we'll get into in a second.
Hmm.
They've changed that up many times from when we were young, and I still think the way that they did it when we were kids, I still think that was the best format. Now they've got these, well, I mean, I guess this year they were kind of doing it as like a team format. So you had two guys, on the same team, and I believe they were combining the scores and stuff like that. But it wasn't the race where it was two players against each other racing.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. I thought that was kind of stupid, where you'd get, a big man against a little guy, and it just didn't make a whole lot of you know,
Sense.
a whole lot of sense. But I think getting the fans more involved in the dunk contest, I think, might be beneficial. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the players. Can the players be creative enough?
Yeah.
Can we, and are we getting, you know, decent names? Like, I don't remember the last time a legitimate all star was, you know, involved in it.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I agree. It's been a while.
at least to a point where they were competitive. They don't have to necessarily win and
Yeah.
stuff, but I don't remember the last time that there was
And a
you know,
lot of people are blaming LeBron for that, saying because he hasn't done it. Has he created a precedent? And then, the other thing is I don't know how much you watch Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp, but Shannon Sharp is a huge like pro LeBron guy, which is great. It's his boy and all that. But he went on air and called LeBron selfish because he felt that LeBron knew he wasn't going to play and kind of held out last minute so that no one could quote unquote replace him. So I wanted to know what your thoughts on that were.
yeah, well, I mean, unless he hurt himself at the practice the day before, then okay, maybe. But I find it hard to believe how you don't know that he's, that you're not going to be healthy enough to play. Right? So why, like, Draymond Green said it too. Draymond Green said he thought that that wasn't the right move by LeBron. And if your foot's sore and stuff, like you can't go out, like it's not like they're playing any defense, right? Like you can't go out for like 2-3 minutes. If you're gonna do that, go out for 2-3 minutes. Let the fans at least see you on the court for a couple minutes, and then pull yourself out.
Yeah,
Right?
and
Like,
they had a picture of Kobe with, like, his shoulder wrapped up and stuff on his, like, knees and all that. It's a regular season game, and then someone put underneath, like, "LeBron can't play because his foot's sore." And it's just, I don't know if it's that new age versus old age or just, like, there's
yeah,
some guys that
I
played
I
through a lot, but it was just funny.
I know I did see that, and I mean there is some truth to that. The one thing I will say about that post is when they had Kobe with the wrap on his shoulder and stuff. That was in a an actual game, right? That wasn't a
Yeah, regular season game.
representation of an all-star game and stuff. But I mean, there was the one year when he was all over LeBron,
Yeah,
right? He
oh, I
was
remember that, yeah.
right in his mug, blocking him, stealing the ball from him. He did the same thing in '03 when him and Jordan
Jordan.
Jordan went at it. He blocked him in that game, and he was not about to. Jordan hit that shot, and what did Kobe do? He went right back and went to the free throw line.
He got fouled by Jermaine O'Neal shooting a 3, yep.
So he was like, what I liked about that was he's like, no, 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 I don't care if you're Michael Jordan, I'm not giving you the perfect ending. And I can't remember who it was, but someone had gone up to him before that and said, like, miss this shot kind of thing. And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm not
Yeah,
missing shot, I don't care.
yeah,
Which is like what we talked about on our first episode when he sent Jordan into retirement with 55.
yeah,
Yeah, he was just like, okay, well, you want to talk smack in Washington. Well, you're gonna see, old man.
yeah.
So, I think I think overall, I think the All Star weekend. I still think it's got a long way to go before it's entertaining. Like I'm not even gonna lie, I didn't sit there all night Saturday.
I
Watch.
didn't either. I was watching more hockey than basketball probably,
I
besides the
watched
dunk
like
contest.
I went through the highlights, so I did see what happened, but I wasn't sitting there for the full 3 hours. I was watching the hockey game with a very pretty female that night. So that seemed like a better alternative you know than watching that.
Then watching Wemby and Chris Paul just chuck the balls instead of
Yeah,
trying to shoot.
yeah. So I mean, I think that's probably the last thing we should get into on All Star weekend before we kind of move on to probably the rest of the season and kind
Mhm.
of where that's going. But I I was really disappointed to see a guy like Victor Wembanyama, who is likely going to be the face of the league here in a year or two, come
Yeah.
out and start throwing these shots up. Like it just made for really bad TV. It's not fun to watch. The fans were not pleased by it, and I think the NBA made the right decision by disqualifying them for that.
Yep. And I mean, you look at Chris Paul, he's part of the Players Association. I believe he's the president. And then the other thing is he's a vet, right? Like, you're supposed to be a mentor. And he does a lot, don't get me wrong. He's involved in the Players Association, does NBA cares. But what kind of message are you sending? And these are premium seats that people are paying like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10K for. Like, it is not cheap to go to an All-Star game. I don't know if you ever looked at just the face value of tickets. It's bloody expensive. So left a sour taste in my mouth. And like, Chris Paul is probably one of the most skilled guards we've seen. Handles, passing, IQ. Like, he can do this stuff in his sleep. If it was two big guys or something, maybe, it's a bit of a joke. But yeah, I didn't really like that. I think they should actually fine them. I know that might sound harsh, but yeah, you disqualified them. But like, if they, like, you and I talked about it, if they allowed for that to happen and they ended up winning, like, there's cash considerations and other things you get. Yeah, I know sometimes money goes to charity too, but it just, your ratings are down. They're trying to, like, up the ante, make the All-Star game more exciting, and then you're just purposely doing something to kind of, you know, squander it. It's not a good look.
Yeah, oh, I completely agree, and honestly, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head there. completely agree. I think they absolutely should be fined for that. That was just it was really disgraceful. And and the one thing that that really could have prevented that and stuff is, going back to what I said earlier about how when we were kids, how the skills challenge did when D Wade won it, I know it was for sure 2 years in a row, but he might have won it 3 years in a row. We're just getting old, so I don't really I don't really remember back that far and stuff. But when you had to take the jump shot at the top of the key or from the free throw line, you kept shooting until you made it. And that was
Yep.
one of the reasons. That was one of the reasons the one year why LeBron lost to D Wade, and D Wade had at the time he had a record time on that. He got up, and at that time that was kind of right before, and I believe that was in the 2006 season. So that was right before he won his first championship. So there was all the talk about, oh, he can't shoot a jump shot, he doesn't have a jump shot, and all that stuff, right? And he missed a couple in the first round, and in the second round he hit the very first shot he took, and then he was off,
Flying, yeah.
and he was off to the races. And that was really the difference in it. If you hit that shot on the first one and you're outgoing, I mean, that was really the spot where a lot of guys really either won or lost um you know that competition. And now I think it actually would make more sense. And I know they do the 3-pointer in the corner with the spinning thing and stuff, which I think that's actually kind of cool, right? So you've got a little bit of you know, a
Contest.
a simulated contest and stuff like that. But
Yeah. I think they took that out of the WNBA because they did that this year too when I was
y-
there.
yeah, well, I mean, some of them are just too short, right? So it's kind
Yeah.
of
It
little
doesn't matter.
little little harder to get over. Use one of those little mini windmills that they give you at the fair and shit like that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess overall, I guess the last thing I'll ask you before we move on is, if you had to grade the overall, All-Star weekend, what grade would you give it?
Maybe a C. I
Yeah,
think that's kind of where I would sit at. Like, I have some ideas that they could probably implement, and I'll quickly share one of them. Talked to Kyrie about it during the All Star weekend, and it's the one-on-one tournament, right? And I know, you know, how do you do that? Do you have it like by position and all that, or some guy's going to get embarrassed to get their ankles broken, or get bageled or whatever? But the Unrivaled League that was started by two WNBA players did it, and there's a $200,000 cash prize, which is significant when you're on a WNBA salary. But it was entertaining as hell to watch on TV. And like the finals were Aaliyah Edwards, who's like a 5, versus Nafisa Collier, who can play a 3 or 4. So like, I don't think many people would expect a center to make it to the finals of a one-on-one tournament, but she did. And like, who knows? Like, I could see somebody like Kat going to like the quarterfinals or finals if they did it for All-Star weekend. Like, it would be interesting to see how players matched up. So I would grade it a C, and I would really have them consider bringing something like that in to kind of change it up and up the ante, and definitely put some money or something behind it.
yeah, for sure. I think I agree. I would say C. I think really the biggest change is, like I said, I was very cynical of the new format and stuff, going into the weekend, having this like little tournament and stuff like that. They really dropped the ball with the 42 minutes of game time in the 3-hour broadcast and stuff. So honestly, I think what they could do, honestly, to change that is you play to 60 instead of you have 3 games to 60, right? Because if it's 42 minutes, you add another 60 points on there, kind of thing, you're probably getting, closer to 2 hours, and then you cut down the other stuff, right? So then it's
Yep.
actually, you actually have more basketball. And um yeah, I think really that's I wouldn't mind seeing them try this again, have the all snub team, extend the game to 50, 60 points instead of 40. So there's actual, more basketball, because I certainly would not have been happy if I paid all that money to see 42 total minutes of basketball. We're not talking about 42 game minutes. We're talking just total minutes with stoppages and, all that kind of stuff. But I think we have rambled long enough about the All-Star game, and All-Star weekend. And I think it's best to let's get on to some real basketball here. what are your thoughts on Luka's start with the Lakers over his first two games? I'll just read his I've got his stats here. First game they won against the Jazz, he had four, and he's played 23 minutes in both. So he's been on a minutes restriction, and I know they announced for tonight's game against the um the
Charlotte,
against Charlotte, I believe he's not going to be on that minutes restriction anymore. So I would expect these numbers to,
go up.
start to take off. But in the first game, he had 14 points, 4 assists, and 5 rebounds on 35% shooting. And in the second game, he had 16 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds on 37% shooting.
Yeah, I mean, those are good numbers, right? Like he's coming off an injury because he hadn't played since I think Christmas Day, right? If I'm not mistaken. So got to get himself into like quote unquote game shape. And he looked good in terms of his physique and all that. Like I think people had him weighing more than he did. Good numbers to start off. He's gonna have to develop the chemistry with the team, but I think it's just going to be interesting to see how he goes into games. Is he going to kind of, let the game come to him and get everybody else involved first, or is he going to try to get his own and then seeing how is it going to come down the stretch with him and LeBron? I think it's going to help LeBron a lot to be off the ball, which I think will be huge. But I think so far he's done a great job. I just think it's going to be kind of figuring out what type of style does he want to play. And now that he is not on a minutes restriction, he can maybe change up, how he plays because he doesn't have to give all that effort right away because he's only playing for 20, 23 minutes. So I think it's going to work out good. And I don't know where they're ranked, but I think it's like fifth or sixth. Don't quote me.
I have
Um,
standings right here. They are currently fifth in the West. They're 32-20. which
yeah,
is which is a lot better of a record than I thought they were going to have coming into the year, considering they basically had and now we're going back to when Anthony Davis was with the team, but it was essentially the same team that they've had for the last you know
2 3 years.
couple of years, and with the addition of obviously Dalton Connect, who was traded, and since our last episode, that trade has been
Rescinded.
now rescinded kind of thing. But yeah, like they're 32-20. They're half a game behind the Rockets, who are in fourth at 34-21. They're 2.5 games behind Denver at 36-19. Um, three
Yeah,
games behind Memphis for second, who are 36-18, and then obviously OKC. There's no way humanly
anyways, Christian.
possible that they're not going to have the first overall seed in the West, kind of thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
if they can get a top four seating at home court advantage.
yeah, and and if they can avoid playing a team like dropping to sixth and playing Denver, right?
Yeah,
Because like the Clippers are 2 games behind them at 31-23. So they're right there. I mean, they've got Kawhi Leonard back, which and he's actually surprisingly, he actually looks pretty spry for considering all the time he's missed. And I expect that there'll be another injury with him at some point down the pipe. Hopefully not this season and stuff, but you can't rely on him to be there you know, every game. But they've had I think they've had a pretty good season considering and stuff. But if the Lakers can avoid Denver in the first round, I think it'll do wonders for them. If they play Houston, I think I like their chances against Houston. Houston's a very good defensive team,
but
but
they're
they're
young.
young and inexperienced, right? So
Yeah,
you've got a guy like Luka who's just, he's fresh
been
off
to
an,
the finals.
you got LeBron he's been to 10 of them, right?
Yeah,
LeBron is, he's so seasoned in the playoffs. His experience kind of makes up for his lack of, I don't even want to say lack of defensive ability. It's just he's 40, right? So he doesn't have the same stamina he used to. So he can't play the hard defense all the time and do what he's required to on offense. But now that they have Luka
he
and
can kind of taper.
LeBron really can kind of step back, and which we've seen this year with he was really deferring a lot to Anthony Davis. I mean, this is the first time in in his career. It might have been the same last year, but I mean, really, outside of the last couple of years, it's really the only time in his career that he's ever been the second scorer or the second option on a team, right?
Yeah,
And now that you've got Luka, I think you defer to him. And I mean, LeBron, his 3-point shot this year is phenomenal.
Yeah,
Like he
no, he's definitely added that to his arsenal.
39 or 40% from three. I've got the numbers here somewhere. Yeah, like he's shooting 39.5% from three.
That's
Like that
crazy.
for LeBron, that's like if you asked me 7, 8 years ago, would he ever be a legit 3-point shooter? I'd say, well, he has his moments where he can get hot and he absolutely can shoot it because he's got the talent, but
Not consistently.
I never put him in that category as a 3-point shooter, but like, I mean, now I think you have to. He like what game was it? Was it the game against Utah? I think it might have been the game. I think it might have been the game against Utah when Luka came in. I could
Hmm.
be wrong, but there was and I know I had texted you during that game, but he hit five. He started the game 5 for 5 from three. And
Yeah.
on his fifth one was one of those heat checks, one of those, logo
Logo threes. Yeah.
that I just, that I can't stand. But that's one of the situations, right, where you're on a heater and you want to pull up for one of those just to
See?
see how it goes and excite the fans. I'm totally fine with that shot, right? Unless you're, if you're Steph, whatever. Steph can shoot those. Dame can shoot those.
Yeah.
Maybe Trae Young the odd time he can shoot those. But outside of that, I don't really want to see that shot. But I'm getting a little sidetracked. But I think the Lakers, you know, if they can if they can continue their stellar defensive play while playing small ball, I
Yeah.
think I think they can actually make I think I don't think they're going to go quite as far as they would have if Anthony Davis had stayed because they were really actually looking like a pretty good threat to make the Western Conference Finals. And I mean, you get to the conference finals and you've got a healthy Anthony Davis and a healthy LeBron. I mean, anything can happen. Now with the chemistry, kind of getting thrown up in the air and stuff, it's very hard to
Yeah.
totally make such a significant change and go really far in the playoffs. I'm not saying it can't happen
Just
because they've
not
got
likely.
LeBron and they've got Luka, but just with them playing such similar styles, I think there's going to be a little bit of time that it's going to take for them to mesh. And you know, looking at next year, I think they're now that Luka's there, I think that's really going to start to attract free agents again
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff like that because I think for a while people were kind of okay, like where does this team go after LeBron retires? Is it Anthony Davis's team? What's his health going to be? Right now you've got Luka, and this is if Luka decides to stay with the team, he could, when his contract expires, he could say I'm out.
Yeah, it could.
And he could go to some other team. I know I read a report that he had expressed in the past that he was always respected the Heat and stuff like that, which me being me, I would love to I would love to see Luka on the Heat, but that's a pipe dream at this point. I think he will end up staying with the Lakers. Once you get to an iconic franchise like that, I think you're better off to stay. And I mean the economic opportunity that he's going to have in LA, because at some point he will get that supermax contract. I know he's not eligible for it, right now, but I
Mm.
mean he could very realistically sign a 3 year a 3 year contract with them instead of 5, and then after 3, he's
Eligible.
I don't remember when his contract is due, so when that supermax would have started with if he had stayed with Dallas. But you know, as long as he stays healthy, I mean, his game's not based on athleticism. So he's one of those guys that, I've heard some people, I don't think he's going to play a very long career. Well, I
Paul
think he,
Pierce.
I think he could. I think he could and still have very high numbers because he doesn't rely on that athleticism,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I think I'm really excited to see how this is going to work out. Luka, outside of Jimmy Butler, Jimmy Butler's I don't know if he's my favorite player anymore now that he's not on the Heat, but he was. But Luka is certainly he's one or two for me. I just love watching the kid. What are your staying on the topic of the Lakers? Mark Williams had failed his physical. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of surprised because, if you're looking to ship someone, I thought a team would have a little bit of insight into like, are they going to pass the physical? What kind of shape they're in? They have team doctors, you know. But I'm hoping it's not something like a Karis Levert situation where they found something that could have been a little bit more detrimental. I mean, I'm glad they found it for Levert because if they didn't, it could have been life altering. but I was a little surprised and kind of feel for Dalton Connect because it's like, it's like you're gonna somebody wants you, yeah, you have trade value and all that, and then you just get shipped back. And I know he had told JJ Redick he wanted like a little bit of time to process it, and then he was playing and the games he was in, he was doing his thing. So I know he went to a good school in Tennessee and he seems like he's raised the right way, but it's still a little awkward. It's kind of like, if you end things with your partner, but then you're still living together while you're figuring things out. Like it's just not a clean break. So I don't know what that's gonna look like. I mean, I know it shows that he has trade value, but what does the future hold for him? And is it gonna work out in LA long term? I don't know. And LA needs a big.
Yeah, well, I think that's the biggest, that's the biggest problem. And um, I saw earlier today, Mark Williams expressed that he was surprised that he failed his physical. Like I think he thought that he was going to pass it. So obviously the Lakers saw something there that they just weren't, they weren't satisfied with. That clearly Mark Williams didn't think was an issue, and obviously Charlotte didn't think was a. Well, I shouldn't say that. Charlotte might have thought it was an issue and hadn't vocalized it, and that's why they were, you know, looking to trade him. As we discussed last time, he's kind of had some, some injury issues and stuff. But it's going to be interesting to see. I'm interested to see if he's. I believe he is, but I'm interested to see how that game goes tonight because the Lakers are playing Charlotte tonight. So it'll be very interesting to see. I don't believe LeBron is slated to play. I think they said that he was going to be missing a couple of game, possibly 1 to 2 games with that that
Ankle.
that kept him out. It says he's a game time decision, so I don't know if he's gonna play. I mean, probably the smart thing is give him a an extra couple days of
Of rest because they're on a back to back too.
yeah, because they play tomorrow. Yeah, they're playing in Portland, right? So they're playing two not great teams, but I mean, Portland, that's a team that's been on a little bit of a, they've been on a little bit of a heater here, surprisingly. They've won, they're 6-4 in their last 10 games, and that's after just a putrid start, and now they're above 500 at home. So, that's probably a little bit of a tougher game than um
Most would expect. And if you're fighting to get out of that, avoid that 6 seed, like you said, to play Denver, who's in third, every win counts.
Yeah, well, and because we're on the home stretch, like a lot of teams have played that, that 50, they're right around that 50 game mark kind of thing, just over 50 games. So we got about 30 to 28 games left in the season, and this is when the regular season really starts, especially, in today's NBA. And I mean, historically it's been the same too. I mean, in the 90s and in the 2000s and stuff, guys were just, yeah, I think there was a little bit more pride, so guys got up a little bit easier in November and December and stuff. But it wasn't unusual to see things get a little lackadaisical and lacking a little bit of energy in the in the middle of January, in the low days or the dreary days of January and into early February before the All-Star break kind of thing. But
The dead of winter.
yeah, that's the term I was looking at, in the dead of winter kind of thing. Is there anything that you're gonna particularly gonna be watching for? Moving on from the Lakers, is there any teams that you're kind of keeping an eye on? I know you're a Golden. Actually, I know what I want to ask you. Being a Golden State fan, what are your thoughts on how Jimmy's done there first couple games?
He's fitting in well, which is good, and I'm pretty sure they did have a couple wins in his game. So I'm a fan of it so far, and I think it's going to give Steph a little bit of like kind of like with LeBron, he can step back a little bit. I know that the Warriors have some injuries, but I think when I look at Butler, Gary Payton II, and Draymond, it's going to be a pretty strong defensive lineup too. But I do worry a little bit about them when it comes to a big because of Kevon Looney is there, but can he stop some of those other difficult centers? So I don't know if they're gonna beef up at that spot. And Wiggins was a really good two-way player. Butler is too, but just a little bit smaller in in terms of that size. So it'll be interesting to see how they fare. But I'm hoping that they can either crack. I think they might be around a play-in spot right now, 9 or 10th. But
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong.
they're sitting in 10th. They've got identical records with the Kings. They're at 28 and 27 on the season.
Yeah. So I
Uh,
think if they can sneak into the eighth spot, but I don't know if they're going to get past the first round.
yeah, I mean, since Jimmy got there though, I mean they've won 3 out of 4
Yeah.
since he got there. His in Chicago in his debut, he had 25, 4 assists, two rebounds. His second game in Milwaukee, which they also won, and I don't believe Giannis was playing in that. I think Giannis is still gonna be out for a little bit. Like nothing, it's nothing serious, but I do know that he's gonna be. I'm pretty sure he's gonna be out for a little bit still. But he had 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists in the win against Milwaukee. The loss against Dallas, he had 21, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. And then their last game against Houston, he had 19, 8 and 4, which is, I mean, that's pretty on par for what you saw in
Miami.
in Miami, right? And every once in a while, he's going to have one of those explosion games where all of a sudden it's 35, 7 and 7, right? And you're
Yep.
going to see that. So I haven't really, from what I've seen so far, is it looks like the same, Jimmy Butler of old. I can admit I have a little bit of a hard time watching the Warriors right now because I'm still,
A little
I'm
bit bitter.
still.
Yeah.
I'm still pretty upset about that. Jimmy did say he did come out. I saw earlier today. I don't know if he said it today. It was definitely over the last couple days and stuff like that. They asked him about Miami, and he said, it's still, it's all love, and I've got nothing bad to say about the organization. It's too bad how it ended, but that's the business of basketball, which I don't really agree with that portion of
But
it.
he's got to say it diplomatically.
But I do like that he's at least, unlike, where he didn't say anything about Minnesota and, Philly and Chicago. He's never been complimentary of those organizations. He's talking good about our organization. I think at some point we probably will retire his number, just
Yeah.
considering, I've seen some Heat fans say, "Oh no, you don't retire his number. He didn't win us a championship." Well, Tim Hardaway's jersey's retired,
Right. They
right? And
asked Tyler Hero about Wiggins wearing his number, and he's like, "Well, with how things kind of ended, I think it's okay." So it's definitely a topic for debate.
yeah, I mean, as far as that's concerned, I'm not crazy about Wiggins wearing his number really. Like yeah, it ended bad, but I mean the guy took us to 2 NBA finals and we were an 8 seed and the 5th or 6th seed. I mean, that hasn't happened since the 1999 New York Knicks. You know,
Yep, that's
so
true.
I think I don't like seeing Wiggins wear his number. I don't like Wiggins hasn't been all that impressive. He's definitely talented, but the Warriors, I think they're going to be a much better team. And all of a sudden, Steph is you know
Rejuvenated.
all of a sudden, yeah, he's rejuvenated and he's kind of found a rhythm. And I mean, it's only 4 games, but he seems so far that he's getting along with Draymond and
Yep.
um
So all signs are good early, but we'll see how the rest of the season goes and what happens in the off season.
Yeah, well, I think we've had I think we've touched on a lot of good things. I think next week, once there's been some more games, we'll kind of get into more of a in-depth talking about the rest of the season and stuff. Obviously, we had to go through the All-Star game and all that. So yeah, any closing thoughts before we call it a day?
No, I just think it'll be an interesting second half of the season. I want to see how the play-in looks like and how that playoff picture forms. But there'll definitely be some good matchups, both in the East and the West.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, thank you, folks. That wraps up our third episode of 204 Hoops Talk. I'm Blaine Stenson.
I'm Arjun Narula, and we'll catch you next week on episode 4.
Peace.